Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in Chapter 12 of this first volume, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled, Craving is the Problem. What is the solution? This is a great opportunity to reorient you to the three universal truths and the four noble truths to help you understand the problem and the solution. But we're going to go a bit beyond that today and going into various cravings that you may be experiencing in order to help you see some of the harmful effects of these cravings. And what this chapter is going to do for you is it's going to not only refresh you about the Four Noble Truths, which we covered about 8 weeks ago, but it's also going to set you up really nicely for Chapter 13, which is a new skill or a new ability that I'm going to be teaching you of how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Because craving is the problem, and then there's the solutions that I've shared with you so far, which is breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. But there's some other solutions to solve the cravings and eliminate them from the mind and move the mind to this enlightened mental state where it can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. And it's in Chapter 13 that I help you to identify your cravings and building this skill and this ability. And then I provide you a new tool or a new technique and how to actually eliminate them above and beyond the meditation and generosity. So Chapter 12 is a way to help you to kind of re-soak in the Four Noble Truths into the mind, because hearing them just once doesn't typically help the mind to really understand them and then practice them. So already in this program, over the last 4 months, I've discussed the Four Noble Truths already 3 times, and this is the 4th time. So if you've been in these classes regularly, then that's fine. It gives you a chance to understand it again and really soak it in, ask questions, get help with whatever it is that you're challenged with. If you're joining us for the first time or you haven't been joining us regularly, maybe you've just joined in the last few weeks, this is a great class for you because it starts at the very beginning with the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths. I'm going to be guiding you through, helping you understand these. So I'd like to welcome all of you to today's class, whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been joining us regularly, because as you learn the teachings of the Buddha, it's important that you don't believe any of his teachings. I share this with students when they first start, and whenever I start presenting the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths, it's so important that you don't believe what I say, that you don't believe what you see in the book, that you don't believe what other people are telling you that the Buddha taught. You can learn these teachings, you can reflect on them to independently verify them, and you can practice them. And as you practice, you're training the mind and transforming the mind away from the pollutants that are in there. And this is where you see the real results, because as you uplift and eradicate the pollution out of the mind, you start seeing that the discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, and even resentment, jealousy, and all these other discontent feelings are going to gradually diminish until eventually more and more they're going to be eliminated from the mind. And you can't do this through belief. So the Buddha didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. He didn't teach you to believe a bunch of things and then something great happens when you die. Instead, you're learning now, you're reflecting now, and then you're practicing now to transform the mind and train it to eliminate discontent feelings so that now you can move to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. And he does that through sharing with you the natural laws of existence so that you can understand this natural world around you. Because as long as you lack wisdom of this natural world, then you will struggle and have difficulties in the world. You'll make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. And we experienced the same thing where we awakened to the wisdom of the natural law of gravity. As we were born and we grew up, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity, so we kept falling down. We kept hitting our elbow, our knee, our head. We broke our toys. We knocked over glasses. We had difficulties riding our bicycle and all these other things. But slowly but surely, we awakened to this natural law of gravity. We gained wisdom about this natural law. And when we lacked the wisdom, we made unwise decisions that led to unwholesome results. But slowly but surely, we gained the wisdom of this natural law of gravity, and we started making wiser decisions that produced more wholesome results. And now we can do anything. We can fly all over the world. We can climb ladders. We can do all kinds of things because we understand this natural law of gravity and we have the wisdom of it. Our mind is fully awakened to it. Well, we struggled and had difficulties with that natural law of gravity for about the first 12 years of our life. Well, you have these other natural laws that your mind needs to awaken to, that as you have a lack of wisdom about these natural laws, you will struggle and have difficulties, just like we did with the natural law of gravity. So when we awaken to these natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught, we will make wiser decisions that will produce wholesome outcomes because we now have more wisdom and we're more informed about this natural world. But until we fully cultivate the wisdom that we need, we'll struggle and have difficulties. And part of those difficulties are things like sadness and anger and disappointment and grief and all these other discontent feelings that we experience. So I'm going to reorient you and refresh you on these teachings and give you a chance to ask any and all questions. And then I'm going to move into sharing with you some individual cravings using the tables. If you've seen chapter 12, you saw those tables, or that table that I put in there where I put potential cravings and then the harmful effects is if you're craving this particular thing, that there's certain harmful effects associated with it. So as we go, if you'd like to ask any questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll see that and be sure to answer your question during the class. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So this first universal truth is the universal truth of impermanence. This is where you learn that things are constantly changing in the world, where the weather is always changing, your physical body is changing, your job, your income, your bank account, your relationships are constantly changing. Whatever arises, it's going to change and it's going to fade away. This is called a conditioned object. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. There's also things that are called unconditioned objects. Enlightenment and the natural laws of existence are unconditioned objects. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. This is why the teachings of the Buddha that he taught 2,500 years ago are just as applicable today as they were back then, because these natural laws haven't changed. People's understanding of these teachings that the Buddha shared, their understanding has changed, but the natural laws themselves have not changed. So these natural laws of existence, they don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. Same thing with the enlightened mental state. That the enlightened mental state, the mind is unconditioned. There's no more conditions in the mind that are causing it to be shaken up. You've purified the mind. So the enlightened mental state, it doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. It is experienced because the mind is unconditioned and there's no longer conditions in the mind that are causing it to be shaken up. So you can independently verify this universal truth of impermanence by looking around the world. That, remember, you learn the universal truths and the Four Noble Truths and other teachings, but you don't believe them. So now that you've learned this universal truth, that it's universally true that all these things in the world are constantly changing, you can look around the world and try to discover if there's anything permanent. And if you can find one thing that's permanent, then you've disproven this as a universal truth. It's not a universal truth. So you can look at the sidewalks, you can look at your house, you can look at a fence that's maybe been painted, you can look at your own physical body, you can look at objects around your house. If you have pets or animals, you can look at that. You can see all these things are constantly changing, so therefore you can verify it as a universal truth. And now you have wisdom to know that all these things in the world are constantly changing, which is important to understand as you learn the Four Noble Truths. Then there's the universal truth of discontentedness. This is where the Buddha is explaining to you the unenlightened mind in conditioned feelings. There's these conditioned feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. Pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. The mind is experiencing these pleasant feelings based on some condition. Some condition or conditions have to be met. And when those conditions are met, you will experience happiness or excitement or elation or thrill, exhilaration or euphoria. Then there's painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others. And these are conditioned feelings. There's some condition, something that's happening, some condition that's occurring that is causing the mind to now experience these painful feelings. Then there's feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. Like I put boredom and loneliness in here, but some people say that's quite painful for them. So you could put that in the painful category. But shyness or displeasure or unsatisfactory mind is a good example. If you were in public transportation and you were sitting there and somebody's body was touching yours that you didn't know, you probably would feel uncomfortable. Your mind's not painful, it's not experiencing pleasure, it's neither painful nor pleasure. It's kind of like dissatisfied. And this is a great example of this particular feeling. So the Buddha explains this in the original teachings using the word dukkha. And this word dukkha, I'm translating it to discontent, discontented, or discontentedness, because when the mind is experiencing those conditioned pleasant feelings, it's discontent. If you've ever been so excited and so thrilled that you like fell down or twist your ankle or dropped your mobile phone or some other kind of calamity like this, then you understand that your mind was discontent in that situation. And of course, when you're experiencing painful feelings, you felt discontent when you were angry and frustrated in others. But even when you're shy, or even if that person you don't know is sitting next to you on the bus and your body is touching theirs, then your mind is discontent, or it's discontented, or you're experiencing discontentedness. Oftentimes people would translate this as suffering. If you've read teachings of the Buddha in other places, or you've been exposed to those teachings, you might have heard the word suffering being used. I don't use this word because I don't feel it accurately represents what the Buddha was teaching. Because when you experience happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering. Or if that person you don't know is sitting next to you and your body is touching theirs, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering. Or if you were experiencing shyness, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering. But of course, if you experience sadness or anger or some of these other feelings like guilt or shame or stress or anxiety, resentment or things like this, you would probably say you were suffering. So that word suffering only explains 33% of what the Buddha was discussing on this particular topic of discontentedness and this universal truth. So that means you're missing 66% of what he taught if you use that word suffering. And if you're trying to get to the enlightened mental state and you're missing 66% of what he taught, then you're going to have a real challenge to get to enlightenment. So it's important that you understand the full spectrum of what he's describing here, which is pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, and these are conditioned feelings. Essentially, the unenlightened mind needs this condition and this condition and this condition and this condition and this condition, and then I will be happy, right? And then when those conditions don't exist, now I'll be sad. In the enlightened mind, you're experiencing unconditioned peacefulness, unconditioned joy, or we might even say unconditioned happiness if we'd like to use that word. Because In the enlightened mind, you don't need all these conditions to be met before you are happy or before you are joyful. In the enlightened mental state, all of that has been wiped away. You've eliminated all those conditions, and the mind can just always be peaceful. It can always be calm and serene and content and joyful. You can always maintain your happiness and you feel fulfilled. The mind is beyond this pleasure and pain where it's going up and down throughout your life. So by the time you remove the conditions that are causing this up and down, the mind can just always reside in that peaceful and joyful mental state with that unconditioned happiness. And we're going to be describing what those conditions are that shake up the mind when we get to the Four Noble Truths. Now you can independently verify this by looking around and looking at your experiences that you've had as you've gone through life, and you can see that all the different feelings that you've experienced have fit into one of these three categories. And you can reflect on this and you can see that the Buddha is perfectly describing your experience in the unenlightened state, that you experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. And these feelings are based on some condition. When some condition either exists or does not exist, then the mind's going to experience these pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. Now, the third universal truth is called the universal truth of non-self. This is the solution to one of the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the unenlightened mind. There's 10 fetters or 10 pollutions or 10 taints that the Buddha discovered. And as part of your journey to enlightenment, you're working to eliminate these 10 fetters. And when you uproot these 10 fetters and get them out of the mind will experience this brightness, this radiance, this enlightened mental state, this peace and this joy. And you'll gradually start experiencing that. You'll be getting glimpses of this as you're moving closer and closer to it, and you're diminishing and eliminating these 10 fetters or these 10 pollutions. One of those pollutions is called personal existence view, where the mind falsely believes or mistakenly understands that this physical body or this mind is who you are as a person. But the Buddha is saying that you're not this body, you're not this mind. But as long as your mind has this personal existence view, you're going to cling to this self-image or cling to this self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. That when somebody says something agreeable to you about your self-image, you'll get pleasant feelings. But when somebody says something disagreeable to you about your self-image, you'll get painful feelings. And the same thing about your self-identity. If you hear agreeable things, you'll get these pleasant feelings potentially. And if you hear disagreeable things, you'll get these painful feelings. Well, this self-image, like your clothes, your jewelry, your hair, your skin complexion, whether you have wrinkles or gray hairs or any of this other stuff, whether you have a little bit of fat or a lot of fat around your stomach or your hips or what have you, none of this stuff is you. It's not who you are. But as long as you think that this body is you, then you're going to be shaken up when you see a gray hair, you see a wrinkle, somebody says something agreeable or disagreeable. If you can't find that perfect shirt or perfect pair of pants that you'd like to wear today when you're going out to see this person, you're going to have all these struggles and complications if you think that this body is who you are. And that self-image is not you. It's impermanent. It's constantly changing. And the same thing with the self-identity, that if you have certain things in your mind, like I am Canadian, or I am American, or I am British, or I am an Aussie, or I am Dutch, or I am Spanish, or I am Italian, or any of these other I am, like if I am a police officer, I am a lawyer, I am a Buddhist teacher, I am this, I am that. If you have this I am in your mind, then once again, when you have agreeable contact, you're going to get pleasant feelings. And when you hear disagreeable contact, because it's only a matter of time that you hear something disagreeable about Americans or Canadians or British people or wherever you're from, it's only a matter of time because of impermanence before someone becomes degrading and disparaging about those things. Whether it's your sexual orientation or your job or what you do in the world, if you adopt this as your identity and who you are, then it's only a matter of time before your mind is shaken up. if you've ever had a job for a significant period of time and then you stopped working that job for a while and you felt lost, you felt like, oh my goodness, I don't even know who I am anymore, because you may have identified with that job as being who you are. Or if you've ever been in a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife, and that relationship ended for whatever reason, you might have really struggled because you felt like a part of your identity is gone. You're no longer a boyfriend, you're no longer a girlfriend, you're no longer a husband or a wife. Or when your kids left home, you might have felt quite miserable that you feel like you're no longer a mom or you're no longer a dad when this has occurred, because part of your identity was wrapped up into this role that you were performing. And as long as your mind holds on to this identity or this self-image, your mind will get shaken up. So the Buddha gives you this solution as the universal truth of non-self, and he shares with you, you're not this body, you're not this mind. This self-image and self-identity is not who you are. And you can independently verify this to be true for yourself, that if you cut off your arm, or if your arm was cut off or amputated, are you less of a person? Think about that for a moment. If your arm was cut off, are you less of a person? I imagine that the most of you are thinking, no, I'm not less of a person. I have less use of a hand and less use of an arm, but I'm not less of a person. And you're right, you're not less of a person. So your mind knows to a certain level of detail that this body is not you. Because if this body is you, when I asked you about an amputation of your arm, and I said, are you less of a person? You would have said, yes, I'm less of a person because I have less arm and less hand. So you know to a certain level of intellectual understanding that this body is not you. But your mind is clinging to this body, thinking that it's you, even though intellectually you might understand that this body isn't you. Or you can look at how you viewed yourself over your childhood, your teenage years, early adulthood, and then now, and you can see how your image of yourself and how you think of yourself has been constantly changing over time. There hasn't been this permanent self. And you can even use the thing that I share with people about pointing to yourself. You know, where is David? Somebody might point and say, David's right there. Well, no, that's just a shirt. So if I get rid of that shirt, where is David? Someone might point again and say, there's David right there. No, that's not David. That's just skin. Okay, well, let's get rid of the skin. Where is David? Okay, you point again. Well, that's just ribs and muscle tissue and organs and fluid and things like that. That's not David. None of that stuff is David. We can't point to a David. This word David, or this label David, was just assigned to this being, this body, so people could easily refer to a certain individual and we would all know who we're talking about. So this body nor this mind is who you are as a person, but as long as your mind's clinging to it with that personal existence view, you will feel like you have to uphold your reputation, you will feel like you have to defend your reputation, you will feel defensive in certain situations. In social situations, you might feel awkward or weird when you're in certain social situations, and this is all because of that pollution of personal existence view. You'll feel shy in certain situations, you'll be hesitant to do certain things, you'll have certain fears that will arise out of this. But when you eliminate the personal existence view through training your mind to realize non-self and deeply train the mind that this isn't who you are, then your mind can reside more peaceful and joyful because you've eliminated that fetter or that taint or that pollution. And it takes training to gradually help the mind to realize non-self. And this is part of the training. So let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions on any of the three universal truths. And you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see your comments and be able to answer anything that you share. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. Let me just look one more time. Yeah, I don't see any questions anywhere in our platform. So you guys must be understanding this to a certain degree. So let's move on. Oh, here we go. We have a question from Christine. In Zoom, she's asking, is it normal to feel that the concept of non-self is very abstract? When you first start looking at it and getting introduced to it, yes, because it's very hard to see the truth about the universal truth of non-self. This isn't something like the universal truth of impermanence or discontentedness where you can readily see it through your own direct experience. You really need to sit with understanding what personal existence view is. So understanding what the pollution is first and how it's impacting you, the struggles that you're experiencing because of it. And then when you understand the solution, which is the universal truth of non-self, and you start setting with that and reflecting on it and implementing it, then you can see it more clearly to be the truth. And that's where you awaken to this universal truth. But with the mind unawakened and not having the wisdom of this universal truth, yeah, it feels abstract. It feels sometimes like pie in the sky. What do you mean there's no you? What do you mean there's no me? What do you mean there's no I? Right? It can feel very strange. But the more you look at it, the more you investigate it, the more you realize that there really truly is nothing there, and you cultivate this wisdom. More and more as that pollution of personal existence view goes away and you eliminate it, you'll start seeing the truth very clearly that there absolutely is no self. But it takes time to develop that. And that's why in chapter 16 of this book, in this program, we spend that entire class session and that entire chapter focused on personal existence view and the fetter of conceit, which combined makes up the ego. So you'll see that we're going to spend a lot of time on that. And here, as I've been going so far, I've been introducing you to this over and over. And perhaps over the last 4 months, you've seen enough indication that this personal existence view, this pollution or fetter, is a real problem. And that you've seen situations where I've talked about enough examples where you see that, yeah, this is impacting you in a negative way or unwholesome way. And then what you start doing is getting your arms around the solution, which is the universal truth of non-self. And you'll need to talk about it more. You need to discuss it. You'll need to ask questions. You need to view your direct experience in daily life and to see the truth for yourself that there is no you. There's just a body and a mind that's come together, and now we call this a person. Essentially what we have is this big bag of skin, and there's these bones and fluid and muscle tissue and all this stuff inside of it. But none of that stuff is you. That's not who you are. Okay? All right, let me check YouTube and Facebook one more time. Looks like... Oh, Christine, did you have a follow-up question?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah, when you say observing in the daily life, what came up while you were talking for me was lately I struggle with some health issues, and I started to think of my body as just some functioning micro mechanism, something like that. That's kind of, I cannot even influence it, what it is doing, and it feels like it's becoming less and less of me. Is that the direction of where I should head thinking? Yeah,
that sounds normal to me, that you start realizing that this body is functioning and it's doing what it's doing. You need to take care of the body. You need to take care of the mind, and it's very wise to do that. But don't see it as who you are as a person. Therefore, you won't get shaken up with agreeable or disagreeable contact related to the body or the mind.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I also see a question that's coming here on Facebook. The question is, can you use Buddhism as a sort of psychotherapy because the things you are saying are very powerful for the mind? Yes, essentially the way that I look at the Buddha's teachings, among other ways, I kind of look at them in different ways, is that what the Buddha did is he discovered and understood the human psychology and explained it in common terms that the average person could understand. Rather than having to get a PhD in psychology or psychotherapy, you can understand these natural laws of existence, and a component of what he's sharing is understanding the human mind. And of course, there's other components like understanding the natural world around us, how the mind functions, and all these other things. But a big component of the path to enlightenment is understanding how the unenlightened mind works and how the enlightened mind works, and moving your mind closer and closer to that enlightened mind. And the Buddha does this through common language that the common person could understand. Because remember, he was a prince and he spoke a royal language at the time, and only royalty and noble people understood this royal language. But when he left out of the palace, he used the common language so that the common person could understand what it was that he taught, because he was interested in his teachings reaching the widest audience possible. So he boiled down human psychology in some very common terms. And now what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're training the mind to eliminate things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. Because in the psychiatric field, I of course don't know the psychiatric field inside and out, but I have exposure to it. I don't think that their goal is to help you eliminate anger. They might be helping you to manage it to a certain degree, but what the Buddhist teachings are doing, which are very powerful, I agree with you, is to eliminate these discontent feelings. And I don't know anything else on the face of the earth that's based on eliminating discontent feelings and completely ridding the mind of discontentedness. I don't know that there's anything else in the world that is designed to do exactly that. And if there is, wonderful, but I'm just not familiar with it. All right. So we'll go on to the next part of what I plan to discuss with you guys today to help you understand the problem, the solution, and the elimination to the discontentedness. And I need to help you understand this definition of craving, desire, attachment. What this is a mental longing for something with a strong eagerness, where the mind is pulling in the direction of the objects of its affection. It's yearning. The mind is thinking that the next new shiny object around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases and chases and chases and chases, and it thinks that this object is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction, some kind of lasting fulfillment. So it chases after it. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets these pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings. So you might have experienced these cravings, desires, attachments, expectations, wants, holding, grasping, clinging. If you've been walking in the mall and you saw a new pair of shoes or some new technology or something, and you're like, oh, I just gotta have that. And you just like almost lurched for it. You've yearned for it. You pulled towards it. You chased after it and thought that this was going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction for you. Well, that's the craving, desire, attachment. And if you look at your mind, you've experienced this, whether it's with something like a pair of shoes or new technology, or if you wanted a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you might have felt your mind longing and yearning for it. You felt lonely, and you felt like if you could just get a partner, you would be completely fulfilled. Or if I could just get that new job, or if I could just get a raise at work, and you felt like this longing, yearning, if I can just get a bigger house, if I can just get a bigger car, if I can just get this or that or this or that, everything will be perfect in my life. This is what craving, desire, attachment is, that mental longing and yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, thinking that the next new shiny object around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. And now this is where you can start understanding the Four Noble Truths before we start discussing the individual cravings that the mind can potentially have. So the first Noble Truth is explaining the problem. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness, those conditioned feelings, conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. The mind is going up and down and up and down and up and down. There's not this permanent peacefulness. There's not permanent joy because of the second noble truth. So the first noble truth is explaining the problem is that this discontentedness, these conditioned feelings, are a real problem, and they plague the mind, and they make it difficult for you to make wise decisions when your mind is all shaken up. When your mind's shaken up with discontent feelings, you'll tend to make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But when you can maintain your calmness and composure, now you can make wise decisions. But as long as your mind is polluted and unenlightened, it won't be able to maintain its calmness and composure. You'll have this period of time where the mind is shaken up. And what's causing that is in the second noble truth. Discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments. because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. So this discontentedness, the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, is caused by craving, desire, attachment, those wants, those expectations, the mental longing and strong eagerness, because the mind's wanting things to be permanent, but yet you live in this impermanent world that you can understand through the universal truth of impermanence. So if the mind gets the objects of its affection, which you're longing and yearning for, you get pleasant feelings. You get so happy, you get so excited or elated. But if you don't get what you want, then your mind feels painful feelings, or sad or angry or frustrated or stress or anxiety, or these other discontent feelings, even guilt and shame and fear. And then there's those neither painful nor pleasant feelings as well. The mind is longing and yearning. It's wanting the objects of its affection. It wants to be permanently experiencing these conditioned pleasant feelings. But as long as the mind is basing its inner feelings on some condition, that condition is impermanent. So therefore, your happiness is impermanent too. This is why you haven't been able to experience permanent happiness, is because your mind is basing its happiness on some condition. If I get wealthy, or if I get more money, or if I get a new friend, or if I get a new job, get a new house, or I get something that I want, then I'll be happy. But now that thing that you based your happiness on is changing. It's constantly changing. So therefore, your feeling of happiness or excitement, it isn't permanent, because you're basing your feeling on some impermanent condition. And now the mind moves to these painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. One of the examples that I use is that if you think back to when you got into a new relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, when you first met them, you had all these pleasant feelings. Wow, this person has affection for me. They're sending me messages. They're calling me. They're inviting me out on dates. We're going to the movies. We're going to dinner. We're spending time at the park, just having interesting conversations. There might even be some intimate contact. Wow, all these pleasant feelings. But then as this relationship went on, you added all these expectations, and they added these expectations. And now the relationship became angered and frustrated and irritated, and you had all these discontent feelings associated with these painful feelings and these conditions that weren't getting met, these expectations that weren't getting met, certain things you wanted that weren't getting met. So now the relationship ended. And then when that relationship ended, you experienced anger or frustration or sadness. You might have had boredom or loneliness or other feelings like this. And this is because the mind's craving permanence. It thought this relationship was permanent, but it was always impermanent. But the mind just didn't understand that because it lacks the wisdom of the universal truths. It doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence. When you got into that relationship and you felt all these pleasant feelings, the mind was craving for this to be permanent and wanting it to be permanent, but yet it wasn't. So when you split and you guys separated for whatever reason, your mind had painful feelings. It wanted this relationship to be permanent, but it was always impermanent. Even if you were together with your partner long term, one of you are going to die first. And when one of you die, the other person felt miserable. It wasn't the love that caused that. And we'll explain that when we get to chapter 15. But it's not the love that's causing the grief or the misery, because the same thing that's causing the mind to be discontent in that situation that I just described is also causing the mind to be discontent if you get a new car or some kind of new material object. And then when you buy this new thing and you feel so great, you got your shiny red sports car with the convertible or something else like this. You're driving down the road, everyone's looking at you and thinking you're so great. You're showing it to your friends and your family. You're feeling so accomplished, right? You got this brand new car. Well, then you come out and you've got a scratch on the car. Wow. Now you're frustrated. Now you're angry. Now you're sad because your mind's craving permanence. It's wanting this vehicle or whatever object we're talking about. It wanted it to be permanently beautiful, but this object is impermanent. Even if you didn't get that scratch, the paint was going to fade. You're going to need to change the tires. You're going to need to change the oil. The fabric and the upholstery inside the car is going to be changing. And as you create these pleasant feelings with this brand new car, and you're craving for it to be permanent, as this car is changing and it's fading away, now you're going to experience sadness or frustration or irritation because you're craving for this car to be permanent. The same thing that's causing the mind to be discontent here is also what causes the mind to be discontent at a funeral. When somebody dies, the mind is grieving perhaps. If you're unenlightened, you're going to experience grief when somebody dies that you're attached to. And what's going on is the mind is craving for grandma and grandpa to be permanent, or mom and dad, or brothers and sisters. The mind's craving for them to be permanent, but they were born, so they had to die. They are impermanent. It's not possible for them to be permanent. And the mind knows that intellectually, that everybody has to die. But the mind is untrained and lacks this wisdom. It has this craving, this longing, this yearning. It's holding on to mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa, or brothers and sisters, or friends, and it wants them to be permanent. But yet they are impermanent. And as long as you're holding on to these people, you're going to experience this painful feelings. And the same reason why people have these painful feelings and other discontentedness at the time of a funeral, you can experience the same thing at a wedding, perhaps. That when somebody goes off into the world, maybe brothers or sisters, they get married, you might grieve or feel sad at a wedding. This is just the mind craving permanence, wanting to hold on to brother or sister permanently. And parents even have this when they send their kids to college. That's the whole goal of a parent, is to raise your kid to be a wise decision maker so that they can go out in the world and make very wonderful and wise decisions, and they can be independent of you. This is the sign of a successful parent, that your kids can go off into the world. But oftentimes parents will grieve when they send their kids to college or they get married because their mind is craving permanence and they're trying to hold on to this person permanently. So this is the second noble truth, that the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment. The mind's holding on. Now, you don't believe this. You shouldn't believe it. Even though I've given you all these examples, you've learned it. Now you start reflecting on it. And what you do is you start looking over your life and you look at certain experiences that you've had. The last time you were angry or frustrated or irritated or sad. It might have been today or yesterday or last week. You can look at your experiences and you can see that where you were angry, frustrated, irritated, annoyed, that your mind was causing it itself. There was something your mind wanted, maybe more than one thing. And when you didn't get what you wanted, your mind experienced anger, sadness, or frustration. Same thing with the pleasant feelings. If you got a brand new apartment as you were growing up, or a brand new house or something like this, and you wanted mom and dad to come visit you, when they came and visited you and saw that you were more established, you got so excited that mom and dad perhaps was coming to visit you, or something else you wanted. When you got it, you got these pleasant feelings. When you didn't get what you wanted, you got these painful feelings. And you can reflect on all the situations in your life where you have experienced discontentedness, and you can see where your mind is causing it itself. Because in the unenlightened state, we will typically blame other people for our discontent feelings. You are making me angry. You are frustrating me. That is annoying me, right? And what we'll tend to do is we'll falsely attribute these feelings to somebody else or to a situation, and we will try to push that person away, or we will try to push the situation away. And we think that solves the problem, but it doesn't, because you just get angry again about something else. So you can push people out of your life and you can push situations out of your life all day, but it doesn't solve your anger, because that's not the source of your anger. That's not the real cause. The real cause is deeply embedded in your own mind. It's the craving, desire, attachment. And if you're pushing people away, you can't live harmoniously with other people because you're falsely understanding what the problem is. You have wrong view. The other thing that happens when you have wrong view is you'll become bitter and harsh and aggressive or hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, or your actions. And now they might choose to leave out of your life. And now you can't live harmoniously with those people either. Or the third thing that you might do is you might put your expectations on these people. You might want certain things out of them and try to control them and get them to do things your way. And if you can just get everybody to do things your way, then you'll feel like life would be peaceful and life would be enjoyable. But the problem is that there's 8 billion people in the world, and you can't get 8 billion people to do things your way. So as long as you keep pushing people away, as long as you keep being bitter and harsh and aggressive and hostile towards people, as long as you put your expectations on people, they're going to feel the pressure of what you're doing, and they're not going to feel comfortable to be around you, and they will tend to leave out of your life. And you'll find that there's fewer and fewer and fewer people that you can spend time with because your expectations just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And it's only a matter of time when you get this new friend that they're not going to meet one of your expectations. Maybe when you first meet, you don't have much expectations for them, so you can be friends with them. But as time goes on, you might start adding these expectations, and when they don't meet your expectations, you'll push them to the side. You might be aggressive or bitter with them, or you might put your expectations on them, wanting to control them. And now the number of people you can spend time with diminishes, smaller and smaller, fewer and fewer. So if you're interested in solving this problem, then now that you understand the problem, which is the second noble truth, that the cause is craving, desire, attachment, the third noble truth is explaining to you the solution. The solution is to eliminate discontentedness. It's possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. If you can eliminate the cravings, the longings, the yearnings, the chasing after the objects of your affection, having all these wants and expectations, and training your mind to pursue your needs, your goals, your objectives, right? When you can go forward in life in that way, where you're not chasing after things, but you're also not indifferent either, and just sitting around being lackadaisical and indifferent. When you can practice this middle way where you gradually pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest, and you realize that these external things aren't going to provide lasting satisfaction, now you can reside peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. Because if you get the things that you're pursuing, wonderful. But if you don't get what you pursue, then maybe you'll just reassess your goals, or you'll adjust your goals, or you'll add some wisdom to more gradually work towards those goals. But you won't be discontent just because you haven't gotten something that you wanted. So these cravings, desires, attachments, wants, and expectations are plaguing the mind and setting it up to fail. You're setting yourself up for misery. If you allow the mind to get these conditioned pleasant feelings, it's only a matter of time before those conditions change, and now you're going to be experiencing painful feelings. So the way that you eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments is with breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. The breathing mindfulness meditation, you're arising this awareness of the mind, and more specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where you're becoming aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. Where you experience the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness arising, you cut that off and let it go. And then more and more, you're gaining this control of the mind. And we're going to be talking about this some more next week as we discuss identifying your cravings, desires, attachments, and how to eliminate them, is how to use these discontent feelings as like the red light on the dashboard of your car. That this car is flashing this red light telling you there's something wrong and you need to pull over and you need to investigate this. And in some cases, you need to take it to a mechanic who has more knowledge than you. So when you start seeing this discontentedness arise, it's an indication to you that you've got craving, desire, attachment, and you need to investigate that. And that's what next week's class is going to be about. But in the meantime, what I've been guiding you guys towards over the last 4 months is to develop this breathing mindfulness meditation practice and to develop generosity. Because the breathing mindfulness meditation, as you're developing that awareness of mind and concentration, and you're training the mind to know that when you have a thought, you can let that go and come back to the breath, you're training the mind to let go, to let go, to let go. Because when there's craving, desire, attachment, the mind's holding on, it's clinging, it's chasing, it's wanting the objects of its affection. So where you observe that with mindfulness, that your mind's doing that, if you're doing the breathing mindfulness meditation, you can train the mind to let go and no longer chase after this thing, but instead pursue it as a goal, objective, or an interest. And with generosity, you can train the mind to let go as well. Because with craving, desire, attachment, the mind tends to hold on. It tends to want things to be permanent. It has these selfish desires. It wants everything to be fulfilling and satisfying. It wants, your mind is wanting things to be permanent. So when you give and you share your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources, this helps you to get established to where you can easily let go of things. So when you're in meditation, doing breathing mindfulness meditation, your goal isn't to eliminate thoughts. Your goal is to arise mindfulness and concentration so you can use those qualities in daily life. And you're letting go and letting go and letting go, maybe 20 times, 100 times per session. As your mind moves off the breath, you let it go and you let it go and you let it go. So you're exercising the mind to more easily let go. So that where you observe with mindfulness in daily life that your mind is longing, yearning, having craving, you can let it go and reside peaceful and joyful. And the way that you accomplish that fully is in the fourth noble truth. The path to eliminating discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching that the Buddha shared. That is 8 individual steps that is going to guide you in how to train the mind and get to this enlightened mental state. These 8 individual steps are like dialing in individual dials in your life practice. So if you think about like a sound system, that you have these big speakers and you're trying to produce this beautiful sound, and you've got these 8 dials that you're dialing in closer and closer to get this beautiful sound coming out of these massive speakers, that's what the Eightfold Path is doing. That as you learn these steps individually and you dial it in closer and closer in your life practice, you'll get a better performing mind. Your life will be functioning more peacefully and more joyfully because you've dialed in these 8 steps more and more closely. In the Eightfold Path, it starts with right view. Right view is the Four Noble Truths. That's what I've been describing to you so far, is that your mind is causing its own discontent feelings. Because with wrong view, we will tend to blame other people. And that's wrong view. That means everybody else has to learn the teachings and you're already perfect, right? You're not perfect yet. You haven't gotten to enlightenment, so your mind is still experiencing discontentedness. And you're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong. Every single being who is born is unenlightened. They wouldn't be born if they weren't unenlightened. So the mind just lacks wisdom. And in these first 2 steps of the Eightfold Path, right view and right intention, you're gaining the wisdom as a foundation to start your journey on the path to enlightenment. And you dial this in closer and closer that you start understanding right view. So that now in the past, where you would get angry and you would start blaming other people and becoming bitter and harsh and aggressive, you start realizing like, no, that's not the actual problem. That's actually causing the problem. If I'm starting to be bitter and harsh and aggressive with people, that's going to cause me problems. And I'm not interested in doing that anymore. So let me restrain the mind. When I get angry, when you get frustrated, when you get irritated or annoyed, pull the mind back. Sit down, have a conversation with yourself. Look internal and figure out, what are the cravings, desires, attachments? This is how you practice the Four Noble Truths. This is how you practice right view, and you dial it in closer and closer. Rather than continuing to blame other people and looking for external things that are causing your discontentedness. Instead, the way you practice right view is you start sitting down with yourself. Or you might need to sit down with your teacher and have a conversation and help to see how your own cravings are causing these discontent feelings. And the more you can look inward and you develop this ability to identify your cravings, and then using breathing mindfulness meditation, generosity, and what I'm going to be teaching you next week, you can start skillfully eliminating these cravings, desires, attachments. And as you start peeling this stuff away, you'll start seeing the more peacefulness and joy come into the mind. If you've been practicing these teachings over the last 4 months that I've been sharing with you, you might already be seeing more peacefulness and more joy coming into the mind. Certain things where you got angry before, you might not be getting angry anymore. You might be getting a lesser version, you might be getting annoyed, or you might have just completely eliminated any kind of annoyment for that particular thing. But of course, you need to do the work. And that's what this whole Eightfold Path is all about. So there's the moral conduct and there's also the mental discipline. The reason why the Buddha includes moral conduct into his Eightfold Path, these aren't rites, these aren't rituals or ceremonies that he's teaching you as part of his path. He's not teaching you rules or commandments or anything like that. But instead, he's teaching you and exposing you to these natural laws. The natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result, is helping you see why you're experiencing the various things that you're experiencing in life. And as long as you're putting harm out into the world through your moral conduct, then harm is going to come back to you. So you can think that you have the very best intentions. You can think that you have the very best speech. But if you don't understand the natural law of karma, if you lack the wisdom of this right intention, right speech, and right action, then more likely than not, you have some wrong intentions and you have some wrong speech and some wrong actions. And you may even have wrong livelihood, perhaps. So when you understand the natural law of karma, you learn it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and then you practice it and you start seeing the improvements that it's making in your life, you'll come to understand that this moral conduct isn't rules or commandments. The Buddha discovered these natural laws and he got to this peaceful and joyful mental state, and he made himself available for 45 years for all those with a sincere interest to learn and practice his teachings to be able to step forward and gain guidance from him and seek guidance from him to be able to understand these natural laws to now improve your wisdom. And when you understand the wisdom behind these teachings, then you'll have a tendency to practice them more and more. The Buddha doesn't tell you about your personality or your character or anything like that. That's up to you. But he's teaching you about the pollutions in your mind, how to uproot them and eliminate them. And he's teaching you about these natural laws so that you can see the truth for yourself. You'll figure out through your own personality and your own character how you would like to speak and things like that. But there's some general guidance around these natural laws that you need to understand. And with a lack of wisdom around this, you will struggle and have difficulties in your relationships. So chapter 5 is where we went through this in detail, and you're probably going to need to revisit that multiple times as you journey to enlightenment. You're going to probably need to remind yourself of those 5 factors of well-spoken speech as you're heading out in the morning, or in the middle of your day, or in the evening, or if you're getting ready to go into an important conversation with somebody. You might look to those 5 factors of well-spoken speech to get them firmly rooted in your mind so you can practice them more readily. And some of these other teachings, you're going to need to revisit them multiple times in order to fully dial them in closer and closer. So let me pause here before we go into talking about specific cravings, desires, attachments, and what those harms can be, and see if you guys have anything that you need clarity on now that I've kind of refreshed you on the 3 universal truths and 4 noble truths. You can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions just yet. I see the thank you from the person in Facebook. Is that Raphael? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You're very welcome. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So perhaps we'll just move on to discussing the next part of our class, which is this table that I share with you in chapter 12, where I give you examples of potential cravings. Now, it's important as you review this and we talk about this, that you understand that the object itself is not the craving. It's the mind longing and yearning. It's the mind's relationship with this thing. So if we just take the first thing, the automobile, okay? You can have an automobile and it can be a need. It can be something that provides you transportation and you go from point A to point B, and this is something that you need. And that can be very healthy for your life and helps you to get the things that you need and collect the things that you need. But somebody can also have a craving or an attachment to their automobile, which can be destructive. Like if you were like me when I was 17 years old, I got my very first car. I think I washed that car every week for about 6 months or a year. I washed it every single week, trying to keep it looking permanently beautiful. And I vacuumed it every single week. I tried to keep this car looking immaculate because I was attached to it. And then when I saw bird poop or somebody spit on my car, I got angry. I got frustrated, right? Because I wasn't able to keep this car looking permanently beautiful. So there's this excessive amount of work that I put into this automobile trying to keep it looking permanently beautiful. And it took me away from other things in my life, like my college studies. And there was a certain amount of ego there, right? And there was a lack of time that I was able to spend with those people close to me. And if you have an excessive craving for automobiles and say you collect lots and lots and lots of automobiles, there's potential harmful effects of pollution. So these are all things that can be experienced as potential harmful effects if you have a craving for the automobile. But the automobile itself isn't the craving. That's just the object. The craving is the longing and yearning to keep it permanently, or to collect lots and lots and lots and lots of automobiles. And there's other cravings here too. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but those of you guys that are seeing this in a visual format, you can see what I've got listed here. These are just examples of potential cravings. Children, clothing and jewelry, fame, food or eating, animal products, happiness, helping the world, job titles, life partner, and there's another section of this table as well. But let's just take a couple of these for examples and help you see. So children, if you have a craving, a longing, yearning for children, your mind can be discontent if you're unable to have children. Let's just say that you biologically are unable to have children, or say that you're in a relationship that you're not able to have children. Maybe you're in a same gender relationship. So maybe you're not able to have children right now, right? Based on whatever criteria. And if your mind is longing and yearning and craving to have a child, then you're going to be discontent. There's nothing wrong with having a child. You could have a child. You could potentially even adopt if you're unable to have children for any reason. You could adopt a child, and this will allow you to have a child. But then when you have the child, you could get attached to this child and long and yearn and put expectations on the child and pressure them to do the things that you want them to do. Whereas if you have a longing and yearning for having lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of children, maybe you have so many children, maybe you have 10, 12, 20, 30, 40 children, who knows, right? There's nothing wrong with having children, but if you have a craving for it, your mind can get into this condition of discontentedness when you either can't have children or you have children and now you might try to get them to do the things that you want. Let's look at some other ones here. Happiness. If you've been taught that you should be longing, yearning for happiness, and now you're chasing after wealth, or you're chasing after a job title, or you're chasing after a bigger house or a bigger car, as long as you keep thinking that these external objects is what creates happiness, you're going to be utterly discontent, because each time you get more money, you get a better car, you get a better house, you get a better job title or what have you, you keep chasing all these things and ultimately you're going to end up dissatisfied. And this can sometimes result in suicide, that the mind becomes to the point where it's experiencing such significant painful feelings that somebody could commit suicide. You've seen this with celebrities. Certain celebrities, when they first become famous, they get all these pleasant feelings based on the condition of their fame. And now they become really famous and really famous and really famous, but then their fame is impermanent and their fame fades away. And now they're feeling painful feelings. And they don't understand that. Even though they're famous and they're a celebrity, they still lack the wisdom of these natural laws of existence. And we've seen very rich and very wealthy people commit suicide as a result. And they just didn't understand craving, desire, attachment, and these natural laws. Where if you understand these natural laws, you understand that suicide isn't solving the problem of craving. It's just causing more problems, because you're going to be reborn, most likely not back into the human realm, and now you're going to continue to struggle with extinguishing these cravings. So you should really appreciate and value this human existence, that you have the ability to learn these teachings, extinguish these cravings, and get to the enlightened mental state where you'll no longer experience any discontent feelings. So these are some other cravings that are potential, right? Not everybody has these cravings, and not everybody has a craving for this particular thing, right? So there's power, there's sexual contact, there's substance abuse, there's wealth. These are all potential cravings that the mind could have. You can even have a craving for perfection. right? Where you want your house to look perfect. You want your clothes to look perfect. You're working on a computer and you want your project to be perfect. And when you don't quite meet all those perfection criteria and all those expectations, you can feel guilty. You can have obsessiveness. You can be controlling. You can have feelings of worthlessness, and you can have excessive work. So you can look at your life if you're being obsessive. We call this a mental illness or a mental disorder. If someone's OCD, it's not a mental disease. It's not a problem with the brain. What it is the mind's having craving for perfection. It's longing and yearning, wanting things to be permanent. So if you train your mind to eliminate the craving, you can get rid of those constant overactive and obsessive thoughts that we refer to as OCD. And these are some others here that you guys can read through in chapter 12, and you can see what are the potential harmful effects. Just because you have an automobile doesn't mean that it's a craving. Just because you have a child doesn't mean that it's a craving. Just because you have a certain job title or a life partner doesn't mean that it's a craving. But if you don't have a life partner and you really want one, that's the craving, desire, attachment, the want, the longing, the yearning for a life partner. And the interesting thing is, the way to eliminate cravings is there's essentially multiple ways to do this. There's the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, which I've taught in other parts of this program. And then next week, I'm going to teach you, as part of chapter 13, another technique of how to identify your cravings and analyze the mind to be able to put together a plan to surgically go in and remove some of these cravings. But one of the other ways to eliminate cravings is to actually fulfill it. So if you have a craving for a life partner and you're really longing and yearning for a life partner, you can cut that off and let it go and train your mind to be peaceful and joyful without a life partner. Or you could actually just get a life partner. You could take your time, date people, make a wise choice, and get a life partner. And it's like, all right, you've got a life partner now, and you fulfilled that. I also use the example of if you have a craving, desire, attachment to go to the Philippines, and you've always wanted to go to the Philippines, and you've never been there, you could cut that off and let it go. You could eliminate that and then just never go to the Philippines. That's one way to do it. And that's what breathing mindfulness meditation does. That's what generosity does. And that's what part of what I'm going to teach you next week is going to help you to cut it off and let it go. But another way to eliminate a craving of wanting to go to the Philippines is to just go and see it. And then you cross it off your list. But if you're not observant of your mind, it's going to be craving the next thing. Now you're going to want to go to Japan. You're going to want to go to China. You're going to want to go to Russia. You're going to want to go to Italy. You're going to want to go to the next place and the next place and the next place and the next place. So as you're training your mind and you're eliminating your cravings more and more, you can get to a point where you're peaceful and joyful because you've done what it is that you're interested in doing in this world. You've accomplished what it is that you would like to accomplish. But if you keep allowing the mind to long and yearn, it gets what it wants in one particular situation, and now it forms another craving. It wants another one and another one. So you buy one motorcycle, you want another one and another one and another one and another one. Or you buy one car and you want another one and another one and another one. Or you have one child and you want another one and another one and another one. Or you maybe have one partner and you get bored in this relationship and now you want another one and another one and another one. This is the craving, desire, attachment. The mind's chasing. The Buddha calls it roaming and wandering. That the mind is just roaming and wandering throughout the cycle of rebirth, constantly trying to find something that it can latch onto and be fulfilled. But every time you latch onto something and you base your inner feelings on that thing is a conditioned object. So as it changes, now your feelings are going to change too. You're not going to be able to get to the permanent peace and the permanent joy. So this is everything that I have to share with you guys today. I would like to open up to any questions that you guys have about these individual cravings. We can look at some of these tables individually, some of the individual cravings. We can talk about your particular cravings and certain challenges that you're having. with specific cravings. Let me know what it is that you guys have questions about, because a teacher's role is to provide you guidance and help you along the path. But each individual student, this is your journey to enlightenment. You're going to need to get involved with the teachings and be able to know what it is that you need help with. So if it's something about one of these charts or tables, or if it's something else that you've come across with the relationship to the teachings of the Buddha, or if it's something about a previous chapter or something like that, we're more than halfway through the time of this program, but we're halfway through the book at this point. We're halfway through the content. So I'd like to be sure that you guys get any questions and clarity that you need before we now move into addressing and learning some other really important topics that's going to help you on this journey to enlightenment. So you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. Okay, so we have a question here coming in on Facebook. It says, when you are upset by an insult or bullied, or can't be able to say no, is that possible that you are craving others' judgment? So in a situation where somebody says something that's disagreeable, that's what the insult is, right? And you experience discontentedness, that's because of your cravings, desires, attachments. You're craving for everybody to look at you in a positive light. And while it would be wonderful if every single person in the world was polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, that's not the world you live in. You live in a world that's impermanent. There's going to be some people who are polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. And because of impermanence, there's going to be people who are impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. Those people are struggling with their cravings, desires, attachments. They're struggling with their anger, their hatred, their ill will. And they're struggling with their ignorance and their unknowing of true reality. They don't realize by being degrading and insulting to somebody that it's actually harming that person, and it's also harming them as well, that it's harming their relationships. But your mind, the reason why your mind is experiencing discontentedness when you're experiencing an insult from somebody is that you are craving for people to view you in a certain way and uphold a certain relationship. So we're not talking about what's right or wrong, because it would be wise to not bully people, to not insult people. But what's causing your mind to be discontent is that you're craving for things to be a certain way. And as long as you're craving for permanence and you want everybody to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you, when people aren't polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you, your craving isn't getting fulfilled. So therefore, you're going to experience painful feelings. So when somebody is polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you, don't allow the mind to get conditioned pleasant feelings. Like, oh, this is great. They're being polite and respectful to me. Oh, this is so wonderful. Oh, I just enjoy being with this person so much, right? If you allow the mind to do that, now when somebody's insulting, you're going to experience painful feelings. Now, that's what causes discontentedness, is the craving, desire, attachment. But in this situation, you have a choice to make. If someone's being insulting to you, do you choose to continue to be friends with them? It's not going to solve your discontentedness if you choose to no longer be a friend with them. But it might be a wise decision to not involve people in your life that are doing unwholesome things like this. So not pushing this person away, but just choosing to move on, perhaps, particularly if they're brand new. If they're somebody that you just met and they're already being insulting to you, it's probably wise to just move on and not create a friendship with them. But if it's somebody that you've known for a while, or it's one of your family members and you're more committed to the relationship and they're starting to be insulting, you still have to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment to eliminate those painful feelings. But it also might be wise for you to sit down with mom or dad or brother or sister, your life partner, your children or others, and help them see how their insult is not promoting a healthy relationship between you and them. And you would like to do that when you're calm, when you're content. It might be a few hours, a few days, or a week or two later before you can sit down and talk with this person. So that's not going to solve your problem. If mom or dad, if they could snap their fingers and instantly change today, or brothers and sisters or life partners or children, if they could instantly snap their fingers and change today, you still have cravings. And when you're involved with somebody who's being insulting, you're going to experience painful feelings. So you've got to eliminate your cravings to be able to eliminate those painful feelings. But in certain relationships that you're committed to and you're around those people regularly, it can be wise for you to sit down with them, help them gain some wisdom to realize that their insults isn't promoting a healthy relationship with you, and you are interested in having a healthy relationship with them, and you're not interested in insulting them, and you would appreciate if they could maybe look at the things that they're doing to not insult you. And if you can do that from a loving and kind and compassionate perspective, using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech to speak at the right time, what you say is true, is gentle, is beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness, you'll find that you can have really successful conversations, and these people can gradually work to improve the way they function with this wisdom that you share with them. You don't need to share with them that it's Buddhism necessarily. You don't need to use the B word necessarily, right? You can just share with them the wise teachings that they're causing harm through their insults. But be sure you still focus on your own cravings, desires, attachments. If you avoid that, you're not really solving the real problem. That's why this chapter is titled Craving is the Problem. What is the solution? Well, the solution is to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. And in the process, in more committed relationships, you might help those children or your life partner, your parents or others, where you're able to help them to gain some wisdom, and this will help improve your relationships with them. And in some situations, you'll just choose to move on, or you'll choose to maybe pause the relationship and kind of step away for a period of time as you're working on your own mind. And this is part of your journey to enlightenment. So thank you for your question. Let's see if we have any other questions. Oh, it looks like Christine has a question in Zoom. Go ahead, Christine.
I kind of have a follow-up question on the previous question, which is related with others being judgmental or harsh. And I realized that while it doesn't make me angry towards that person necessarily, it seems like I don't really have a big filter to what they say, and I kind of assume that it is true, and I believe that it's true, and then I actually direct the same amount of judgment that they have towards me, towards myself, instead of getting really angry at them. Or sometimes I observe that I'm sitting in meditation and my mind is going like, I get angry at them, then I get angry at me, then I get angry at them, and then I get angry at me. I understand that probably the whole solution is to eliminate the personal existence view. But what's the best way to deal with that?
Okay, so if you were standing on the side of the road and there was these 18-wheel trucks buzzing up and down the road, and somebody walked up to you and said, "Hey, Christine, you should cross the road now." This is a very unwise advice, very unwise guidance, and you probably wouldn't listen to it. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, you would agree that this is an unwise person. You're not going to listen to their advice. So if somebody is being degrading, if they're being judgmental, if they're being harsh and aggressive and bitter, they're unwise. They haven't cultivated the wisdom of this path. They don't realize that their own behavior, their own conduct, their own decisions is very unwise. So if you wouldn't listen to that unwise person that tells you to cross the street when there's all these 18-wheel trucks buzzing by the street, why would you listen to this unwise person who's telling you all this degrading stuff about you? So if you hear that and you've taken it in, realize that this is unwise for them to just unsolicited walk up to you or tell you any kind of degrading or disparaging things. So just think of it as unwise, that you would like to probably get help with somebody who's more caring, more loving, more compassionate. Maybe you talk to your teacher and say, "Hey, I had this situation. Somebody told me I had ego," or somebody told me that I talk like this and I talk like that. And then somebody who can objectively help you. Because if you share with me the situation and if I see issues that are problematic for you, I'll tell you, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to just tell you what you want to hear. If you've been doing things or share things with me that are unwise, I'll let you know that they're unwise, but I'll support you and I'll encourage you. I won't be degrading and disparaging with you. So if there's someone who's being degrading and disparaging and giving you unsolicited comments about what you're doing, that's very unwise for them to just give you this unsolicited advice. So you should look at that as unwise. You're not judging them. You're not looking down on them. You're not degrading them at all. But you just can consider it to be unwise to give somebody unsolicited advice and be degrading and disparaging to somebody. And that way, you don't have to absorb it and take it into your mind and beat yourself up about what this other person's saying. Because if they're being degrading and disparaging like that, they're lacking wisdom, and therefore their mind is essentially muddled to a certain degree. And the way that the unenlightened mind works is it's got this dirty window because it's got all this pollution in the mind. So when it looks out at the world, it's looking out at the world through this pollution. So oftentimes when people are looking at you, they're looking through their own pollution, and they might be judging you through their own pollution. So they might be jealous because of their cravings, right? Or they might have a certain amount of ego or certain things that they want, and they're looking at you through their pollution and they're judging you. But what they're really doing is they're looking at their own mind. They're seeing their own pollutions. They're seeing their own ego. They're seeing their own wants, their own selfish desires. They can't see through their jealousy. And some people feel like if they diminish you and they put out your candle, it makes their candle shine brighter. And this is very unwise for them to do. So just like you wouldn't listen to that unwise person that tells you to cross the street, don't listen to this unwise person either. Seek out guidance from people who care about you and who are going to tell you the truth and give you real, clear, direct feedback in an encouraging and supporting way.
Thank you very much. This was really helpful, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, Chrissy agrees with your question and says she feels this also. So that advice should have helped Chrissy as well. Yes, you're welcome, Chrissy. Chrissy and Christine, the dynamic duo. All right, let's see if we have any other questions. I saw Joe looking down at his keyboard, but he usually raises his hand. There he is. Oh, I knew it. Go ahead, Joe.
My question is kind of a general one about generosity and deploying it. I know you're not supposed to, it's not wise to give all your money away and you can't even pay your bills, but, one of my cravings is like photography, and, sometimes I'll have a craving for like a lens or something like that. I'm wondering, should I, in that instance, if generosity is a way to, combat that, do you just, I don't know, give somebody your money, just, get my money away from or maybe even give away enough money so that you don't have quite enough to do that, that sort of thing, I guess. And then mindfulness meditation is another antidote, but should you do that in that instant? Because I know it's like it's like a mindfulness meditation is like a preemptive sort of thing, where you do it to prevent, the cravings from happening. But should you just do like 5 minutes of that or something if you are finding yourself craving something, to help with that as well?
Sure. So it sounds like you have a craving for photographic equipment. Is that what you're saying?
Well, sometimes, yeah. That's just one thing I have a craving for.
Just one example. Okay. So what you do here is, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but you might not have related it to this, is where, okay, say you have a certain camera, and now you're like, I want that new camera, that new one that came out. I want it so badly, right? But this one is only a year old or 2 years old or something like that, or whatever it is, right? Or maybe if it's even 10 years old and you're not quite sure if this is a craving to just get a new camera. So what you do is you go look at the camera, you go inspect it, you go to the store, you touch it, you hold it up, you look at it on the internet, and then you step back from it for a while. right? And you just kind of spend some time thinking, whether you really need this camera or not. And then see if the mind is obsessive about it. If the mind is overactive and just obsessing about this camera, thinking about it all the time, it's a craving in that situation. So what you would like to do is continue. Of course, you would be continuing with your breathing mindfulness meditation. And as your obsession with this camera goes down, then you would like to go back into the store and see it again. Visit this camera again, right? Look at it again, pick it up, look at it on the internet, what have you. Check it out, take your time with it, and then step away from it again and see what happens to the mind. It should be less obsessive about it this time, right? Try to have this control where you can go look at something, investigate it, and you can step away from it. And you might need to do that multiple times to try to observe the mind to see if there's any obsession about this camera and if it's a true need. Do I really need this? Or does the mind just want it? I've done this before where I'm about to sneeze. I've done this before when I first started practicing these teachings. I needed like a pair of shoes, and I would go into the store and I would look at the rack of shoes, and I would stand there and just ask myself in the mind, is this a need or do I want this? Is it a need or do I want it? Well, I have 2 or 3 pairs of shoes at home, but I never wear them because they're old and they don't really work for Thailand. I brought them from America and they don't really fit for the lifestyle here, and they're too hot and I can't easily put them on and off, because here in Thailand you go in and out of places a lot and you take your shoes on and off. It looks like it's a need, but you know what? I'm not really sure. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go get something to eat in the food court and just spend my time to think about it and see how I feel. And I might even leave that day and not even buy the shoes, right? So you can do this with your mind and kind of put the mind in a situation where the mind thinks it's going to get it, but then you pull it back and you restrain it. And this is a really good method to try to observe the mind. Now with generosity, what you can do with photographic equipment is you can say, all right, before I buy something new, I'm going to give away some of my equipment to other people. Things that you don't use perhaps, or things that aren't very needed, or they're things that other people might need. You can give away some of your equipment. So this is one of the ways I help my son eliminate his attachment to his toys. That before we used to buy him a new toy, he used to have to give away like 5, 6, 8, 10 of his old toys to kids in the village or kids in the family or kids at school. He would have to give away those toys first before he could buy a new toy. And this helps the mind to let go of craving. So you can do that too. So it doesn't mean that you'd like to give away your money and therefore you can't purchase it, right? That's not what you're necessarily interested in doing. But you would like to challenge the mind and work to restrain it, but then at the same time be using your breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. And yes, you can be doing meditation in the moment. So like if you went into the camera store and you feel the obsession coming up into the mind, like, oh my goodness, I got to get this camera. You can restrain the mind, take it away, and meditate. You can go sit down at the mall bench and do a 5-minute meditation if you need to, or you can go home and meditate. The Buddha talks about how breathing mindfulness meditation eliminates an evil, unwholesome thought on the spot. And craving is an unwholesome thought. If you're having any kind of cravings, it's going to produce unwise decisions. That's going to then produce unwholesome results. So you can use meditation in the moment. So there's these multiple things that you can be doing. And it's not just one thing that's going to eliminate the craving. It's the generalized training of breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity that you do generally throughout the course of your life. Then where you're seeing obsession arise in the mind, you can go visit these things and step away and do that multiple times, either by viewing it on the internet or going into the store. And then where you see the obsession arise, you can use kind of spot treatments for a little 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. You don't have to go through the full chanting and the full 30-minute session or what have you of meditation. You can do those little 5-minute touch-ups here and there as you need to.
Thank you. And a follow-up question about photography in general, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I guess would a Buddhist think that photography is a form of craving and clinging? Like this image behind me I've had for a few years, and I took it a long time ago, and I enjoy looking at it from time to time. But I guess as long as I'm not opposed to just throwing it in the trash one day and being okay with it, it's okay to sort of do that, to practice photography, as long as, like I said, I can just toss this image without, being upset by it. Because I guess photography in itself, the nature of photography is sort of capturing something that you see, and then being able to look at it later or share it with other people. Is that like I don't know, not the right thing to do because of, craving and attachment to that moment.
Okay, so remember, it's not the object itself that is the craving. So the photograph isn't the craving, or the role of being a photographer. That's not the craving. It's the mind longing and yearning for it that is the craving, desire, attachment. So you could have that photo and practice the way that you are. Like, hey, if I came home and this photo was gone, like somebody stole it or burned up in a fire, I'd be completely fine with that. I wouldn't have any feelings whatsoever. That means that this photograph is not an attachment. But other photographs that you might have taken, you might have an attachment to those photographs. You're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong. It's not like it's wrong to have an attachment. That's not the way we should think about craving, desires, attachments. Craving, desire, attachments, it's just unwise to have them because it's going to lead to unwholesome results at some point. So where you see that your mind is having a craving, you'd like to eliminate it. And that breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity is the generalized training to do that. And then next week, I'm going to introduce you to a new technique that is going to help you skillfully go in and surgically remove some of these cravings that you might have. So we'll talk about that. So remember that the object or what you're doing itself, like being a photographer, that's not the craving. It's the inside the mind. It's deeply embedded in the mind. It's the longing and yearning for these things that is the craving. So that's the first part of your question. The other part I just would like to touch on, you mentioned is it okay, or does a Buddhist think that it's okay to be a photographer? It's important to understand that this Buddhist identity, it's just an identity, right? So for me, I don't identify with being a Buddhist. I don't identify with being an American. This body was born in America. I know that. I intellectually know this body came out of my mom's womb in America, in Washington, D.C. But I'm not an American. I don't identify with being an American. I don't identify with I am a Buddhist. I practice the teachings of the Buddha and I teach the teachings of the Buddha, but that label of Buddhist, I don't identify with it. And also, all people who identify as Buddhist or all people who practiced Buddhist teachings, they don't understand them in the same way and they don't all think about them the same way. So if we have a thought like, do Buddhists eat meat, or do Buddhists drink alcohol, or do Buddhists do this? Well, some Buddhists do and some Buddhists don't. It's all impermanence. So oftentimes we think that there might be this set of rules or doctrine and everybody subscribes to that same thing and does the same thing, but that's permanence. So what we have is this collection of teachings from the Buddha, and different communities are like these different bubbles. And these different bubbles have access to the teachings in a teacher in different ways. So each community is essentially learning different teachings. It's very rare that you will find a community like ours that is learning and practicing with the words of the Buddha. More often than not, people are just practicing oral teachings that have been handed down from person to person to person. So 2,500 years later, now that we're after the death of the Buddha, a large majority of people who consider themselves Buddhist or practicing teachings of the Buddha aren't actually studying with the words of the Buddha. It's very rare and very unique that you have a community that's basing what they're learning and sharing and practicing on the original words of the Buddha. So you'll find a wide spectrum of people that are considering themselves Buddhist that know certain things, that don't know other certain things. I've had people come to learn with me here at the temple in Chiang Mai that they told me, I've been a Buddhist for 30 years and I was a monk for 15 years. And I was like, oh, great. Well, I'm glad you come to learn with me. And I was curious about what they understood because I was needing to help them get to the next step on their journey. So I asked them, I said, okay, so you've been a Buddhist for 30 years and you've been a monk for 15. Can you explain to me what causes anger? And they looked at me and they looked at the ground and they were like, oh, that's just such a hard question to answer. I just don't even know how to answer that question. And, of course, like I understood at that point, like they don't understand the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first thing that any person who's on the path to enlightenment should learn. But here's somebody who considered themselves Buddhist for 30 years and they were a monk for 15, but they don't understand what causes anger. So I didn't look down on this person. I didn't judge them, but it's just the understanding that everybody's journey in life has been different because of impermanence, and not everybody has studied the teachings in the same way. So when you think about those kind of things like, does a Buddhist do this or does a Buddhist do that, understand that that's just a label and you'd like to get rid of that and don't identify with that. And also understand that there's these different pockets of communities that learn and practice in different ways. But when you go back to the original source teachings, that's where you'll see the real truth. And you don't believe those. You learn them, reflect, and practice. And then as your condition of your mind and your life is improving, there you'll know that what you're studying is the real true teachings of the Buddha.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see. I think we have some more questions coming in here. Oh, okay, so Max was saying, great question, Joe. You probably see that because you're in Zoom. I feel personally attacked for wanting more and more motorcycles. No, Max, so here's a great example. Let's use Max for an example, right? So Max goes out and he buys motorcycles and he sells them, right? This is his business. He purchases, he fix them up, tinker them, clean them up, and gets them running and goes back out on the road. And this is part of his livelihood, right? So while he probably does have cravings for motorcycles, I think he would admit to that, but also he's using it as a way to sustain his life, and he's having this hobby. So while he would probably like to restrain his mind a bit and pull it back so he doesn't have, 30 motorcycles in his garage or 20, maybe at one time he had 50 or 100, and now he's kind of gradually scaling back as he's learning about the teachings of the Buddha. But we can actually do things with our cravings, desires, attachments, and be skillful with them. But just because we have, a bunch of things doesn't mean that we're necessarily attached to them. So if you came around me, you'll see that I have lots of books about the teachings of the Buddha. I have the Pali Canon and lots of books. Just because I have lots of books of the Buddha's teachings doesn't mean I'm attached to them. So if these books burned up tomorrow, I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't be upset, I wouldn't be frustrated, because they're just books and the teachings are here inside the mind. And I also have them other places on the internet and they're backed up and stuff like that. But just because we have a lot of something doesn't necessarily mean that it's a craving. It's all about what's in the mind. It's not the object itself. So at one time I did have a craving for motorcycles as well. I had about 5 or 6 or 8 of them at one time. And I realized, how many of these can I ride at one time? I can only ride one at a time. So I got rid of all of them except for one. And now I got this little scooter that I go around with, and it takes very little gas, so I can get around. I don't have to spend a lot of money. And the insurance is like $12 a year. Gasoline is like $6 a month for this thing. It's very low maintenance and I don't have to spend a lot of money for it. Sure, it gets hot, riding it here in Thailand, but nonetheless, it gets me around where I need to go and what I need to do. So we can have these different things in our life, and it's learning how to observe the mind with mindfulness and learning how to identify your cravings and not feeling bad because you observe that you do have cravings. Because if you know you're unenlightened, yeah, you have cravings and this is normal, but learning how to eliminate them, then you can get to the peace and the joy. So today's class and next week's class combined are going to help you understand how to identify what cravings are, so that you're not just like, oh, I have a lot of Buddhist books, so therefore it's a craving. No, because it's not. Because it could be. There are people out there in the world that do have certain books that they're attached to, but it's not the book itself. It's the craving in the mind. So you could have a lot of books and not be attached, but you could also have a lot of books and be attached or be craving, right? So it really depends how the mind is functioning. And this is where you got to go deeper and look at how to identify cravings and be able to use your mindfulness to be able to identify the cravings. It's not as easy as saying, somebody has a car, so therefore they're attached, or they have a mobile phone, so therefore they're attached. These are just the objects. You got to look at the mind and what the mind's doing in order to determine if you have a craving or not. And between this class and next week, you should be able to have this ability more and more to be able to identify your cravings. Let's see what else we've got. Okay, I don't see any questions in Zoom. Here's a question coming in on Facebook. It says, can the non-self be used to cope with an insult? I mean, if someone tells me you are stupid, I assume it's not true. So if you realize non-self and somebody around you says that you're stupid, you wouldn't feel any discontentedness whatsoever. As long as you have personal existence view, which is the very first fetter, when somebody says something degrading like that, you will feel discontent. You'll feel that discontentedness. So you'll need to get to the point where you eliminate personal existence view. And this is needed just in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But if you've eliminated that from the mind, you won't feel discontentedness when somebody says something insulting. And again, you'll still need to decide whether or not you continue to be friends with that person, but choosing to not be friends with them doesn't solve the problem, because the next person who insults you, you're going to get discontent with that too. So you got to eliminate the personal existence view to realize non-self. And then when you realize that this is not who you are, this body, this mind is not you, then you'll know that you can reside peaceful and content and joyful. But as long as you've got that pollution of personal existence view, you will get discontent in situations where people are insulting. Okay, we have some questions here in YouTube as well. Venerable teacher, in this particular sutra, all mental impressions are impermanent, discontented, non-self. What is meant by this? Okay, so what the Buddha is describing there is that when you have thoughts, when you have certain mental activity, they are impermanent, right? If you have discontentedness, this is not yourself. This discontented is not self. And then this body and this mind is not self either. I need to look at the sutra directly to give you more guidance. I would encourage you to use the references and the material that I share. I see you're using Sutra Central, and some of those translations aren't necessarily what I would consider to be the most accurate. So you should be able to find those sutras in the materials that I share and the translations that I share. And then if you have a question on it, you can post it in Facebook. You can send me a private message, schedule personal guidance. But just giving me like a couple snippets like that of the sutra, I can't really fully take in the whole sutra and give you the detail that you need to understand it. So this is probably something you'd like to take offline. And it looks like you have another question here too. This is the follow-up question to those three universal truths discussed today. Okay, I understand. So Parikashit, you would like to probably post that into the Facebook group, and then we can talk about it there. Kochi has a question as well. How to deal with craving for food. Okay, so if you have a certain craving for food, this is because of the central desire through the tongue. What you would like to do is, and we're going to be talking about this next week, but we can discuss a little bit of it now, but I just haven't taught you everything that you need in order to fully understand, right? So next week will be better to talk about this, but let's discuss it a little bit now. Let's say that you have a craving for chocolate cake, that you've went into this restaurant, you tasted this chocolate cake, and oh my goodness, oh, it's just so good. You just can't wait to get back to get your next piece, right? So now, like 2 or 3 days go by, you see this obsession in the mind, you just keep thinking about this chocolate cake, and you just can't wait to go back to that restaurant in order to get that chocolate cake. Well, I don't suggest you go to that restaurant. I suggest you put some distance between you and that restaurant and not go to get that chocolate cake, because going to get the chocolate cake isn't going to solve the problem. By you fulfilling that craving in that particular situation, you're going to get pleasant feelings when you get the chocolate cake. But if you show up to the restaurant and it's not there, then you're going to feel painful feelings. So you've got to distance yourself from this chocolate cake. If you have enough power, you could go into the restaurant and order something else. You could order apple pie, or you could order pineapple or fruit or something else, or order no dessert whatsoever. But as long as you keep giving the mind this chocolate cake, it's going to keep craving it and craving it and craving it. To a certain degree, sometimes you need to fulfill the craving, like I said, But in a lot of situations, it's better to just distance yourself from it and get as far away as you can from it, work on training the mind to eliminate the craving. And then eventually, maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year into it, if you decide to have a piece of chocolate cake, then wonderful, have your piece of chocolate cake and enjoy it. But don't allow the mind to crave it. So by you trying different foods, this will help you to eliminate cravings to food. If there are certain foods that you don't like right now, it's important for you to eat those foods and train your mind that this is just to sustain the body. Because as long as you have craving in the mind, there's going to be certain foods that you like and that you want, and there's going to be certain foods that you're repulsed by, and you won't want to eat those. So if you put your mind in the situation that it is repulsed by, then you can train your mind to look at food as just to sustain the body. So at one time, I used to not like durian. If you know this fruit, some people absolutely adore it. Other people, they don't like it so much. It has the consistency of poop, and it smells like poop. And when I used to eat it, I've never eaten poop before, but if I ever ate poop, I think this is what it would taste like, and this would be the consistency of what poop would taste like. So when I would eat that, I would think about eating poop, and I was repulsed by it. So over time, as I trained my mind, I eventually got to the point where I started eating durian and training my mind to be okay with that and just see it as sustaining the body. And there were other foods as well. I just use this one because I think it's quite comical that there's a fruit that it smells like poop. And there's actually hotels here in Thailand that have a picture of that fruit with a big slash through it. They don't let you bring it into their hotel because of its smell and because of its odor. So you should put your mind in the situation that it's uncomfortable with, in this situation, that with food, you would like to put it in that situation and help train it to be peaceful and joyful regardless. And of course, when you're first starting to do that, the mind is going to be repulsed by it. It's not going to like it. It's going to revolt. It's going to fight you. But slowly but surely, if you can train the mind to ingest food that your mind doesn't like, this will really help you to now just view food as sustaining the body. The other things that you would like to do around food is if you're noticing that you're eating out of emotion, where when you get sad, you turn to food in order to get pleasant feelings, you would like to stop doing that. You would like to cut that off. So if you're going to eat ice cream or cookies or some other enjoyable food just because you're sad or angry or frustrated, you're not going to solve the mind's craving, desire, attachment by going to have food. You're just continuing the craving, desire, attachment. So where you see your mind doing that, you would like to go away from it and not allow the mind to indulge in that. You would also like to eat in moderation, where you're not gorging on food and you're not just eating unconsciously, but you would like to eat smaller portions, and that will help you to eat in moderation. And then the other thing is that if you eat at nighttime, like you have to have that midnight snack in order to fall asleep, your mind can get attached to the point where it won't fall asleep unless you've had something to eat. That's the only time the mind is triggered to fall asleep. So the Buddha teaches this to not eat like that you're not eating out of emotion, that you eat more in moderation, and that you train your mind to look at food as just something to sustain the body. And the way that you do that is put the mind in the situation where it's eating foods that it doesn't actually like, and things that it craves and longs and yearns for, you distance yourself from it. And then eventually, as you eliminate all your cravings, desires, attachments around food, you'll be able to eat anything and everything, whether it's chocolate cake or ice cream or whatever, but you won't have a craving, desire, attachment for it. So you might have to distance yourself from it for a period of time. And then as you notice that you've eliminated the craving, you might come back and have that food again, and then distance yourself again and see if the mind is still obsessed about this food. And then eventually, when you observe that the mind has eliminated this craving, then you can just have it every once in a while and you'll just be completely fine with that. There was a period of time where I was attached to chocolate. I would eat chocolate like it was a meal, right? Like it was like lunchtime. Okay, let's eat a whole bunch of chocolate. That was like lunch, right? And I could see that my mind was craving and desiring chocolate. Well, I started wanting this over and over and over again. So I had to distance myself from it. There was a period of time where I went maybe 6 months or a year without chocolate. And now I just eat chocolate every once in a while. And it's not every single time. And when I do eat it, I'm not gorging. It's just like one little bit or one little piece of chocolate, where before, I was gorging myself on this chocolate. So you'd like to observe that about your practice in your mind. All right, you're welcome, Koshi. Yeah, restrain your mind. Perfect. All right, let's see if we have any other questions. I don't see any on Zoom. I don't see any on YouTube. Let's see if we have any on Facebook. It looks like we've answered all the questions there on Facebook. All right, well, what I'll do then, just to kind of end class, is thank you all for joining for today's class and invite you to attend next week, because next week is where we're going to pull all this together, because this was just a refresher for you and to kind of get a bit deeper into some of these topics, so that next week I can teach you how to identify what is a craving and what isn't a craving. And then I'm going to teach you a way to surgically go in and remove some of these cravings. And I'm going to give you examples from my life of certain things that I noticed that my mind was attached to and that I needed to eliminate, and how I actually eliminated them. Of course, there was breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity on board as generalized training, but there's other things that you'll need to do besides that in order to surgically go in and remove your craving. So we'll discuss that on next Sunday. This Wednesday, we're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation together. So you're welcome to join for that or watch the replay in order to encourage, support, and motivate each other in our meditation practice. This is also a great time to come together and ask any and all questions that you like. It's a free-form question day where we can ask and answer any questions that you like. So you're always welcome to attend those live, or you're welcome to watch the replays, because a lot of the questions that are coming in can actually really help you. So remember, you have all those options to get help. You can post in the Facebook group, you can ask questions in class, you can send a private message, and you can schedule a personal guidance session. So I'll be pleased to help you guys as you're gradually needing help throughout this program and others that you might attend. So you're welcome to attend these future classes. I'll potentially see you there. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.